Hi, I'm Annalie Delaney. I'm student number T00792249. I'm doing assignment number 2, skeletal system bones. I'm going off of my list here, which I just printed off, the list that we were provided. Starting with the skull, we have the incisive bone, which is right there, holds the front teeth. And then the nasal bones are on the dorsal part of the muzzle. And then the maxilla is that bone right there. And then we have the temporal bone on either side. And then the external auditory meatus is the ear hole, or the ear canal. And then we have the frontal bones, which are kind of located between the eyes. And then beneath the frontal bones is the frontal sinus. Next we have the parietal bones, which are on either side here of the skull. And then the mandible is this bottom jaw. And then the ramus, so there's the vertical ramus and the horizontal ramus. And then the temporomandibular joint is where the mandible meets the temporal bone. And then the occipital bone is at the caudal most part of the skull, which connects to the cervical vertebrae. The nasal turbinates are found beneath the nasal bones, and they filter out debris or particles that they're breathing. Say they're breathing dust, it will filter those out, and it regulates the temperature of the air they're breathing. So moving on to the vertebrae, starts with the cervical spine, which extends from the skull back down to the shoulder. The C1 is known as the atlas, and C2 is known as the axis. Those are the first two vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae is caudal to the cervical vertebrae and is located dorsal to the thorax. So that goes from the shoulder blade back to the last rib. Moving caudally, we have the lumbar vertebrae, which is located dorsal to the abdomen. Moving caudally, we have the sacral vertebrae, which is located kind of beneath or between the pelvic bones. And then the last vertebrae is the coccygeal, which includes the tail and the base of the tail. To palpate the spine, you can feel the dorsal spinous process with the middle finger along the midline, and then the transverse spinous process on either side, left and right of the spine, and you can feel them quite well along down the back. The ribs are the lateral part of the thorax, or the lateral wall of the thorax, which protects all the organs in there. The dog and cat have 13 pairs, or 26 altogether. So the most ventral part of the thorax is the sternum. So the most cranial sternum is called the manubrium, and the most caudal sternum is called the xiphoid process. And the costochondral junction is where the bony rib meets the cartilaginous rib. So that's that costochondral junction is where those two meet, and then the cartilaginous part of the rib connects down to the sternum. So the scapula is the flat bone of the shoulder, and then the spine of the scapula is that ridge that you can feel very well. Moving down distally from there is the humerus, and then distally from there is the radius and the ulna. The olecranon process is the point of the ulna, which you can feel very well, also known as the elbow. The greater tubercle, so that's the point of the humerus, which connects to the scapula, and you can feel it very well there. So next from there, moving distally from the radius and the ulna, is the carpus, or the wrist joint. So those are the bones found in there. Moving distally from the carpus are the metacarpal bones, so dog and cat have 5. The first one being the dew claw, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5. Distally from there are the phalanges, so there's 3 parts of those, proximal, middle, and distal, or P1, P2, and P3. So moving on to the pelvis and the pelvic limb, we have the ilium and the ischium. So the wing of the ilium is a good palpable point, which you can feel very well up at the top here. The ischium is this part here, which is the most caudal part of the pelvis, and then the ischial tuberosity is this point here you can feel on either side of the base of the tail. The pubis is the most ventral point of the pelvis, which you can palpate in the groin area there. The acetabulum is where the femur meets the pelvis. So the greater trochanter is the most dorsal lateral point of the femur. And then the head of the femur is located just medial to that, and that's what goes into the acetabulum. So the obturator foramen are the 2 holes on either side of the floor of the pelvis, where the obturator nerves come through, and those nerves are responsible for being able to adduct the legs. Moving distally from the pelvis, or the ilium and the ischium, is the femur, which is the long bone located in that area there. Moving distally from the femur, you have the patella, or the stifle area there. Moving distally from the patella, you have the tibia and the fibula, and then the tibial tuberosity is the point you can feel of the tibia just below the patella, and then the tibial crest extends distally from the tibial tuberosity. So moving distal from the tibia and fibula is the tarsus, and then the calcaneus is the point here, which makes up the hock. So finally we have the lymph nodes. First lymph nodes are the mandibular, which are underneath the mandible. Moving back, we have the parotid, so those are kind of around the base of the ear. And then the prescapular are at the point of the scapula. And then the auxiliary are found in the armpit area, or the axillary area. And then we have the inguinal, which are in the groin area there. And then finally we have the popliteal, so those are located caudal to the stifle area there. Thanks for watching.